Well, good evening. Welcome to our Friday night Bible study. This is for Friday, April the 17th, 2026, meaning we've already crossed halfway through the month of April. Makes sense because I did put quite a bit of time today until my mower died working on the lawn. I was close enough to done. I just pushed the mower in the garage. I'm going to have to take it apart next week and see what happened to it. It hit a pile of sticks and choked on them and died, and then it didn't act like it was working the piston in the engine when I pulled the cord. It's hard to pull, but there wasn't anything going on. It wasn't offering to even try to run. Nothing coming out of the exhaust, that kind of thing. So that's, these things happen. We had an insurance investigator here this week, and we had another company come by to provide an estimate on re-roofing our house. So that's something that I'm waiting on one more estimate. Hopefully I'll have that early next week, and we can go ahead and get something done about replacing our damaged roof. It has rained since then, and we haven't noticed any problems, but something like that, when it's just damaged, you really do want to get it fixed. So hello.
Hello.
That's my wife calling in to join. We apologize for the short introduction tonight. It was all set to get started, and there are certain things that do not follow clock schedules, and one of those came up and got in the way. So we had a stream already started. We've didn't even last a minute, and I went ahead and deleted it because there wasn't really anything on it. But so. You know what I think we're going to do tonight? Rather than spend much time talking about things, there's not really a whole lot to say. I think we're going to go ahead and get started in the book of Proverbs. We're going to do a couple of things to try and speed it up, because we did less than 2 chapters last week. And there are 31 chapters in this book. And if we keep going at that pace, it's going to be sometime next fall before we get out of it. And I think we could move a little faster and still get a lot of value out of the wisdom of Solomon recorded in this book. So let's go ahead and bow our heads, and we'll get started this evening. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings, and we thank you that through the centuries and millennia, people have tried to approach their Creator, and then have tried to share with others what it's like to have that vertical relationship. We want to have, and we want to strengthen that vertical relationship in our own lives, and this is one of the things we do in order to strengthen that relationship. And we know if that's going to happen, we need the Holy Spirit to be part of what takes place, not only for us here that do the presenting, but for those who do the hearing. Send your Spirit to bless each one, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. So we go over here and we get set up to our standard Friday night setup, where you can read the text along with us. We were about to start into Proverbs 12 last week, and something came up and we had to shut off the study a little bit early. So this is where we're going to pick up. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish a kind of a predetermined predetermined list of comments, because a lot of what appears here in the Proverbs is based in the old covenant under which Israel lived. And that was the covenant established at the mountain of God, Mount Horeb, or as we sometimes call it, Mount Sinai. Horeb and Sinai probably aren't the same thing, and the meeting with the Creator when the law was delivered, at least according to the book of Exodus, may not have taken place in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, because technically it didn't take place until after they had left Egypt. And we sometimes assume, well, Egypt didn't include the Sinai Peninsula back then. Well, do we know that? Just a question. Anyway, that's where the old covenant was established, and once the people heard the law and they saw the fire and the flashes of lightning and they heard the voice, they were truly frightened. And their approach was, well, God said it, we're going to do it. Whatever he says, we'll do it. We'll obey. Just, Moses, in future you talk to us, don't let God talk to us. Which was something that God, for the most part, honored. Which was not what he wanted. He wanted that close, personal, one-on-one relationship with his people, but they were in a mindset where that wasn't possible. So he did, he made the best of what was available to him. But because the people had said they would obey, then the covenant got established. If you obey, if you do what you promised to do, you'll receive blessings. But if you don't, bad things will happen. And often the writers of the Old Testament operate from that mindset. And the second verse here in Proverbs 12 will come across that. So I think rather than spending a lot of time going over that and then saying that in the ultimate sense, in the eternal sense, these things are also true, we're just going to say that involves the standard Old Covenant understanding. So chapter 12 verse 1 says, to learn, you must love discipline. It is stupid to hate correction. Now, to me, that goes to the concept that there is nobody out there from whom we can't learn something. Now, we have to be careful what we learn from who, because we're all broken humans, and some of us spout some ideas that don't deserve to be emulated. And so just because somebody says, I'm doing this for your own good, this is discipline and correction, doesn't mean we have to accept it. We have to accept the discipline and correction that leads us forward. So while it is true that it's stupid to hate correction, that is not licensed to other people to say that we have to listen to them. We have to decide what is correction, what is learning, what is helpful, and what would hinder our progress in kingdom living. Verse 2. Go ahead.
I have a question about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That brings to mind the time that David numbered the Israelite when he wasn't supposed to, and he was given the choice of what was it, famine or
there was famine, fleeing from his enemies, or a plague.
Yeah, remember now what you were even talking about, so forget it.
Well, I was talking about the text. It's stupid to hate correction, and there is correction that can help us progress in kingdom living. And there are people who just want to control us and will read us this text and tell us we have to listen to them because they're offering us correction or discipline. That's not necessarily true. We have to make the decision if the correction is useful and helpful or if it isn't.
Are you by any chance, I don't know where you are you by any chance talking about the text that's used where the Lord told one of his prophets to go confront somebody and tell them what they were doing wrong?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, because I know that's a text that's used for legalists will use when they try to control people. They use the Bible. They use that text in the Bible to back up their behavior.
Mm-hmm. And of course, that only applies to the rules they think are important. If they think the rules aren't important, then that's it doesn't apply anymore, and you can't tell them, well, you're not keeping this rule. Well, no, that's not an important rule, but this one I want you to follow. It is an important rule. Well, who gets to decide?
Well, I think the response to that argument is that God told that particular prophet to do it. He didn't tell for anybody else to do it. And if somebody tries to use that on you and say, well, God said to point out your sins, you can say, you're not the prophet that he told it to.
Mm-hmm.
And then throw at them the story of the woman who was caught in the act of adultery, who's innocent, let him cast, he who is sin free, let him cast the first stone.
Verse 2, the Lord approves of those who are good, but he condemns those who plan wickedness. Standard Old Covenant.
I don't like that at all.
Well, I just read what it said.
Read it again.
The Lord approves of those who are good, but he condemns those who plan wickedness.
Does he not love those who plan wickedness? Or does he condemn their behavior?
Well, now there's an important caveat. I'm going to say standard Old Covenant understanding here in this verse, but also reality is what condemns, and God does condemn the wickedness you're planning, but he doesn't condemn the person. He allows reality to take care of that at the point he chooses. Verse 3, wickedness never brings stability, but the godly have deep roots. Verse 4, and this one is written from the male-dominated perspective of the time the book was written. We're going to say it applies both ways. A worthy wife is a crown for her husband, but a disgraceful woman is like cancer in his bones.
And who's going to describe who's going to say what disgraceful is? One man's trash is another man's treasure. How can you look at somebody and make the judgment that they're disgraceful? It's like a certain religious organization that shall remain nameless, who looks down upon people for going shopping on Sabbath without even bothering to question, why are you shopping?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they may be going to pick up medicine for their neighbor or something. You don't really know. You don't know what people are doing.
Well, I wanted to see, because they used the word cancer here, which was not something that the people of the Old Testament would have understood, so they didn't have a word for it. The King James says, "A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones." And then the NIV words it, "But a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones." So this got a little bit more interpretive and rendered cancer. Verse 5, "The plans of the godly are just. The advice of the wicked is treacherous." Which is a good verse to balance off against verse 1, where it talks about discipline and correction. Just because somebody's offering discipline and correction doesn't make it useful, because it might be the advice of the wicked, and that's treacherous, so it would be foolish to follow it. The words of the wicked are like a murderous ambush, but the words of the godly save lives. How often do you see people using their words to destroy? They see something they don't like, they don't just express their feelings about the specific thing they don't like, they make it personal, and they start tearing the person who has upset them down. You're a terrible person, you can't get anything right, etc., etc.
Guilty. Guilty as charged. I apologize.
The words of
People out there that do things to harm others and refuse to accept that they've done wrong. Refuse to admit it.
Well, that's the narcissist. The narcissist absolutely refuses to admit that they're wrong. You know, something goes wrong, it's other people's fault, it's not theirs. They're always right. The words of the godly save lives. If you're tearing somebody down with your words, you can't save a life. And there are a lot of religious type people who go out there and tear people down, and they justify it by saying, "I'm trying to get them to do better." Well, you'll never convince them to do better if you're running them down. It just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you end up worse off than if you'd kept your mouth shut. So if you don't have something good to say, the best thing to do is just keep your mouth shut until you do. The words of the godly save lives. They build up, they heal, they encourage. The wicked die and disappear, but the family of the godly stands firm. Again, Old Covenant understanding of that. A sensible person wins admiration, but a warped mind is despised. Now, I haven't said it yet this evening, but we do like to look at these as potentially something that Solomon wrote down after a given case, a civil or criminal case, was brought to him for further decisions. And so you could go a lot of directions with a case that might lead him to say that a sensible person wins admiration, but a warped mind is despised. 9 is going to be hard to understand. It says, better to be an ordinary person with a servant than to be self-important but have no food. Um, if we live by love in a community of like believers who also live by love, then we serve others and others serve us. So then we're all ordinary persons with servants. I'm not sure what Solomon might have meant here, except as royalty he had a whole house full of servants, and he lived in a culture that considered servants an important part of everyday life. Now, this concept of the self-important being so busy at being self-important that they're not seeing to the needs of everyday life, that one does kind of ring with us. This is an interesting one to imagine a case behind it. The godly care for their animals, but the wicked are always cruel. Sounds like maybe there was an animal cruelty case brought to him. A hard worker has plenty of food.
To his animal.
What'd you say?
I think it was Balaam was cruel to his donkey.
Yeah. A hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies has no sense. Do you know who I thought of when I read that second line?
No.
Do you know of somebody who dreamed up an auto safety device or an auto anti-theft device
Okay, yeah.
and had this plan for multi-level marketing that let everybody in the country get rich? And a person who chases fantasies has no sense. Thieves,
You know, once again, don't judge him.
no,
Consider what could have caused him to act in the way he did.
but there is a fundamental human weakness behind that, and that is we keep trying, even though we know it's inappropriate deep down inside us, we keep trying to receive the reward without putting forward the effort. And this fantasy chasing is that kind of a thing. A way for everybody to have plenty of money. Nobody really has to work that hard. Well, if people don't work hard, the food doesn't get produced, the buildings don't get built, the infrastructure doesn't get maintained. Life gets bad in a hurry unless people work. And everybody should contribute as they are able. But we've got a society and a system, an economic system set up that's supposed to regulate that, but in the process it also gets misused and in some cases enables people to get the reward without putting forward the effort. Looks like I scrolled our next verse way up to the top of the page here. Thieves are jealous of each other's loot. but the godly are well rooted and bear their own fruit. Can you imagine a case that what might lead the king to say, thieves are jealous of each other's loot?
Jealous of each other's what?
Loot, L-O-O-T.
Oh.
They're thieves. They steal things. The things they steal are considered loot. And then they get jealous of each other's loot.
Yeah.
The same thing going on. Number one, they didn't want to do the effort to get the stuff, so they stole it. And then, well, even the effort of stealing it is more than I want to get involved in. So now we start lusting after each other's ill-gotten gains. The godly are well rooted and bear their own fruit. Why? Because they live by love. They understand that they have an obligation to contribute and to help others where it's in their power to do so. And imagine a case where testimony is given in a court case, and at the end the judge says, the wicked are trapped by their own words, but the godly escape such trouble. And perhaps this is a very similar idea. Wise words bring many benefits, and hard work brings rewards. Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. Now I have to make a point here. In some cultures, the term listen to ultimately really means obey. So if somebody talked to you and told you to do something and you didn't do it, they'll accuse you, oh, you didn't listen to me. But that's not the kind of listening that Solomon has in mind here. It doesn't mean the wise do anything somebody else tells them to do. It says the wise listen to others. They listen and then they make judgment on the information they have heard, and then they make their decisions based on, hopefully, lots of factors and not just one person's advice. A fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. Well, I can see this one coming from all sorts of court cases, because there are people who can't wait to take their term in court. They'll hear the other side say something that maligns them, and they think they've got to respond to it immediately and correct what they perceive as the falsehood. And the judge is listening to this case, and he hears this person that can't observe standard courtroom decorum and blurts out when it's not their turn. And then they have the other person who listens to the accusations of his accuser and just waits until it's his turn and presents his case. And so then the judge, king, or in this case Solomon, says, a wise person stays calm when insulted.
Sorry, didn't know that was on.
So that's contrary to most people's human nature. We hear insults. Because we're self-oriented, we feel like it is imperative that we rush to our own defense. Well, this next verse is very pertinent in a criminal or civil justice setting. An honest witness tells the truth. A false witness tells lies. And my wife and I have been following a case that first came into the courts in 2024. There was a mistrial. The case came back to trial in 2025. The defendant was found not guilty of everything but DWI. It's not what they call it in that state, but that's essentially what it was. But we saw witnesses that in that courtroom tell things that didn't even comport with their own testimony earlier in the case. So we could tell, we could tell by their attitude in court. We could tell by the kinds of things they said, by their demeanor. We could tell they were lying. A false witness tells lies. And it is the wisdom of the hearing official, in this case the king, to determine who's faithful and honest and who isn't. Here's a repetition of something we ran across earlier. In verse 6. Now down here in verse 18, a very similar idea. Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. And it's one thing to approach this from the, oh my, I have to be careful what I say. You're going to fail at that at some point if that's the approach you're taking. The words of the wise bring healing because they come from someone who is wise. And that wisdom has nothing to do ultimately with intelligence or knowledge level or any of those things. Wisdom has to do with character. And the more we align our characters with the character of Christ, the more likely that our words, whether guarded or not, will bring healing. Jesus was a healer, and he spoke words designed to bring comfort and healing to people. As we emulate his character, as that character is brought into our own lives and through the work of the Holy Spirit overwrites our defective character, then we become wise, and our words by nature and without a careful guard bring healing. Truthful words stand the test of time, but lies are soon exposed. Deceit fills hearts that are plotting evil. Joy fills hearts that are planning peace. Which is why we talk about kingdom living and about the joy available to those who are able to partake in kingdom living. Because once we start planning peace rather than plotting evil, joy is a natural result. Verse 21, no harm comes to the godly, but the wicked have their fill of trouble. So then I would ask, what did we do in this house to deserve having a windstorm come by and rip the tabs off our shingles? The point I'm making is that you can over apply a text like verse 21 here. When it says no harm comes to the godly, well, on this planet, the sun shines on the evil and the good, the rain falls on the obedient and the disobedient, and so when natural disasters take place, they happen to the godly and to the ungodly.
However, we were protected. We weren't even aware it was happening. We slept through it.
Oh, did we? I thought I woke up and went out and picked stuff up off the street.
The next day.
Well, I did it again the next day because I couldn't see what I was doing in the dark.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware it was happening. I slept through it.
Okay, well.
We didn't get injured.
I was watching some of the weather channels this week. There were more storm chasers active, going after thunderstorms and potential tornadoes. And very often tornadoes get rain wrapped or they're hard to see. But we think we did see some. And whether it was a tornado or not, one of the storm chasers had to come up behind a vehicle and start a turn, and while he's sitting there waiting to make the turn, you see a roof being lifted off a building off at the corner of the camera view and just being thrown out across another building and out onto the road. So these things, particularly this time of year, can happen. And we've talked about how God provides energy to this planet to make life possible here. But that there are forces who will misdirect and misuse that energy. So while the tornado or the lightning or these things show the power of God, we should not then assume that, well, this is God doing it. No, somebody else is doing it. They're just misusing God's power in the process. Verse 22, right in line with some of the other verses in this chapter. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in those who tell the truth. And so will a righteous judge in the situation that Solomon would have been in. The wise don't make a show of their knowledge, but fools broadcast their foolishness. So when you come across somebody who's mostly quiet and observes, well, they're adding to their knowledge base. And they probably could say some things about what's going on in front of them, but they're wise enough to know that their words wouldn't be received. So, don't set your pearls before swine. That advice. The wise don't make a show of their knowledge. They're not out there to let everybody else know what a wonderful person I am and how much knowledge I have and how you ought to respect me because I know more than the rest of you. No. Fools, well, it's kind of the saying we occasionally quote, open their mouth and remove all doubt. They broadcast their foolishness. Work hard and become a leader. Be lazy and become a slave. And if that was the case, what might have been the facts that Solomon heard? Worry weighs a person down. An encouraging word cheers a person up. Do you have the ability to spot people who are burdened with worry? And if you have that ability, then do you have the ability to provide an encouraging word that is not intrusive, that is not controlling, but is simply there to encourage them, to lift them up, to heal them, to cheer them up? The godly give good advice to their friends. The wicked lead them astray. And then there's two other possible readings for this here in the footnote. The godly are cautious in friendship, or the godly are freed from evil. In other words, we're not exactly certain what the Hebrew in that case means. Lazy people don't even cook the game they catch, but the diligent make use of everything they find. Now, this cooking game bit here may have been a metaphor that Solomon borrowed or coined in order to express what he felt about the case before him. In other words, this may or may not have been a game cooking case. The diligent make use of everything they find. The way of the godly leads to life. That path does not lead to death. Living in harmony with the Creator's design for life leads to life. It does not lead to death. It is living contrary to the Creator's plan for life that leads to death. A manufacturer builds a car, and they put a book in the glove compartment of the car, and they say, you need to do this and this, and you need to not do this and this. Doing what it says in the book leads to a longer life for the car. Not doing it, or doing things it says not to do, can lead to a premature death of the vehicle. The way of the godly leads to life. That path does not lead to death. Moving on, chapter 13. A wise child accepts a parent's discipline. A mocker refuses to listen to correction. It is human nature to want to believe we've already got it together. We already know what we should do. And it can be hard, sometimes even for relatively young children, to admit there are things I don't know, that I need some experienced help to get me through. And so human nature sometimes leads certain people to become mockers who refuse to listen to correction. And some of that might come from prior experience. An authority in their figure in their life who was not wise, not godly, told them they needed to do such and so, and when they did such and so, it backfired on them, and they got the impression from that they couldn't trust the instructions of other people, and so they decide, I have to make my own decisions, which I said earlier we do need with the wisdom God has given us to evaluate the advice we're given and to only follow that advice that leads to life. But there are situations where people refuse to listen to correction when in fact it could help them. Wise words will win you a good meal, but treacherous people have an appetite for violence, which, by the way, is not a very good meal. Those who control their tongue will have a long life. Opening your mouth can ruin everything. Again, you can approach that from the perspective of, well, I've got to really be careful about what I say, or you can approach it from the perspective that if I get my character in line with the character that the Creator has prepared for me, then I don't end up feeling like I have to use my mouth to bail me out all the time, and I end up opening my mouth and ruining everything. And you just naturally control your tongue because you understand that only what is good needs to come out. Lazy people want much but get little, but those who work hard will prosper. The godly hate lies, the wicked cause shame and disgrace. Godliness guards the path of the blameless, but the evil are misled by sin. And again, this is character. It is faulty, uncorrected character that misleads people. Godliness, a godlike character, guards the path of the blameless, because now we live in harmony with the way the Creator designed us to live. Some who are poor pretend to be rich. Others who are rich pretend to be poor. Now, why might a rich person pretend to be poor? Well, I'm recalling the story of Sam Walton of Walmart fame, who even when he became so ridiculously wealthy that it all went to his family ultimately, he continued to drive an old beat-up pickup because it did what he needed it to do. Why give something different? And there are other people who are up to their ears in hot because they feel they've got to have the latest and greatest vehicle and so on and so forth. And they're pretending to be rich, but they can't afford it. Verse 8 is fascinating.
I gotta add something there.
All right.
It's been several years ago. Somebody was writing somewhere, and I read it, probably in comments somewhere, that he was in his car going somewhere, and he saw MacGyver on the side of the road, broke down. MacGyver broke down, and he didn't have a fancy car. He had just a normal, everyday car.
Did he mean the actor who played MacGyver?
Yeah,
Okay.
Rich Big. He made a big deal about it. MacGyver was stranded on the side of the road, and the actor, as big a name the actor as he was, had just a plain, regular, normal car.
hmm Well, cars will let you down. Even the newest ones will let you down, leave you stranded. That's just a fact of modern life. So,
Even MacGyver.
yeah. Fascinating here in verse 8. The rich can pay a ransom for their lives, but the poor won't even get threatened. It's one of those kind of, well, that's obvious. Yeah, but sometimes a humbler, closer to the work, to reality lifestyle can keep you out of trouble that other people don't keep out of just because they feel they've got to have this and have that and have the other thing. The life of the godly is full of light and joy, but the light of the wicked will be snuffed out. Standard Old Covenant understanding there. Pride leads to conflict. Those who take advice are wise. How does pride lead to conflict? Well, guy A is convinced that he's right, and he is certain that his approach to living is better than everybody else's. So then he sees somebody else living differently, and he thinks, well, I can fix that. I know what that person ought to do. I could solve their problems for them. But guess what? That person is in exactly the same situation, only with a different viewpoint on life. So he believes his way of living is right, and this goofus over here who doesn't live right is coming over here trying to tell me how to live. Next thing you know, you've got a conflict on your hands. Those who take advice are wise. And taking advice may just mean seeing the thing from the other person's point of view and agreeing that it probably works for them and going on your way and not trying to do it because you know that for you it wouldn't work. So you took the advice from their perspective, but you didn't actually do it. Those who do this are wise. Wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Wealth from hard work grows over time. I want to read that out of the NIV just to see how they put it. Oh, this is interesting. Here's how it reads in the NIV. Dishonest money dwindles away, but he who gathers money little by little makes it grow. In other words, the concept of delayed gratification. I'll put forward the effort now because that's just the right thing to do. I don't have to have the reward right now. All I have to have is the bare necessities that allow me to continue my efforts. And that money set aside can grow and can be very helpful later in life. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. Makes me think of how parents deal with their children. If you get a child's hope up, you need to do everything in your power not to defer that hope. Fulfill those dreams that you bring into their lives. A dream fulfilled is a tree of life. People who despise advice are asking for trouble. Those who respect a command will succeed. The instruction of the wise is like a life-giving fountain. Those who accept it avoid the snares of death. And that's where we need the wisdom promised to us in James 1. Let him ask of God, who gives to everybody liberally and doesn't chide with people. Believe that you receive it. Act on the wisdom that God has given you. Use that wisdom to discern whose advice is helpful and whose advice is a snare. Verse 15, a person with good sense is respected. A treacherous person is headed for destruction. Footnote to be, it's the Greek version reads that way. The Hebrew reads, the way of the treacherous is lasting. Oh. Oh, okay, yes. The way of the unfaithful is hard, is how the NIV puts that. Or unfaithful does not endure. Now let me look at that, because they say does not endure. All right. They, because the NIV does a little bit of interpretation too. So they saw this, the Hebrew, the way of the treacherous is lasting. Yeah, it doesn't get you anywhere. Forever and ever, it just takes you the wrong way. Wise people think before they act. Fools don't, and even brag about their foolishness. Carpe diem. Is that right? Seize the moment. Let me see what that means. A Latin phrase meaning seize the day, originating from Roman poet Horace to encourage making the most of the present moment, trusting as little as possible in the future. It is a call to live fully, often highlighting life's fleeting nature, frequently used to mean enjoying life before it is gone. As long as that's done in the light of eternity. Yeah. Anyway. Wise people think before they act, but fools don't, and even brag about their foolishness. Seize the moment. There's an opportunity. Take it right away. It won't hang around for you. And they think they're smarter than everybody else because of how rapidly they jump on what they perceive as an opportunity. And maybe that's not as wise as they think it is. An unreliable messenger stumbles into trouble, but a reliable messenger brings healing. And that really has to do with how do you fulfill tasks assigned to you. do you do them faithfully? If you aren't able, do you admit it and seek assistance? That makes you reliable. If you ignore criticism, you will end in poverty and disgrace. If you accept correction, you will be honored. And this is not written to give people blank checks, carte blanche, to criticize you up one end, down the other. Again, we have to make wise choices about the criticism we will pay attention to and the criticism it's safe to ignore, because to not ignore it would lead to problems. It is pleasant to see dreams come true, but fools refuse to turn from evil to attain them. Trying to remember where I was. I was trying to remember who said it. And I realized that it came from A-Team. Who was the leader of the A-Team? What was his name? I think maybe my wife's gone to sleep. Anyway, he used to say, I love it when a plan comes together. It is pleasant to see dreams come true, but fools refuse to turn from evil to attain them. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. Now, I personally don't believe Solomon is telling us to become snobs. He's telling us to make choices in our associates that keep us mostly in the company of people who are at least attempting kingdom living. I don't think he's advocating being snobs and shutting out people because, oh, you're not worthy of me. But there is a point at which we avoid the company of people who we can see are foolish and often get into trouble. If you don't get with them, you won't end up in their trouble, right? Trouble chases sinners while blessings reward the righteous. Standard Old Covenant understanding here. Good people leave an inheritance to their grandchildren, but the sinner's wealth passes to the godly. Now, does that mean you can fulfill this simply by leaving a will to see to it that your children and grandchildren get an inheritance from you? Does that prove that you're a good person? Or is this a more generic statement than that? A poor person's farm may produce much food, but injustice sweeps it all away. You can imagine a case that would lead to that statement, where somebody who had power and who misused their power left a poor person with adequate provision now being in want because of the injustice of misused power. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Now, this is a section of Proverbs, a text in Proverbs, that gets misused by people saying, well, see there, you got to beat your kids. No, you don't got to beat your kids. Just because Solomon lived in a violent era and saw correction as applying the rod of instruction to the posterior of learning doesn't mean that's a good way to do it. Solomon's viewpoint, yes, but it may not work as well as he thought it did. Discipline does not have to involve punishment, and the best discipline does not. It relies on natural consequences. The godly eat to their heart's content, but the belly of the wicked goes hungry. Standard Old Covenant understanding. Moving on to chapter 14. A wise woman builds her home, but a foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. Not because she's trying to tear it down, but because her self-serving character means she does things that don't promote the maintenance of the building. Those who follow the right path fear the Lord. Those who take the wrong path despise him. Now, this is a thought that came to me earlier today when I was hearing something in particular. I frequently express my discomfort with the way we translate this term that often gets rendered as fear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And there is a human viewpoint that sees fear as a form of respect. The powerful man who has loyal people to back him up can make you fear him if you cross him. But let's not confuse that fear with respect. It's not respect. You might do what he wants you to do and, quote, respect his wishes, but you do not respect him. You despise him. If it is actual fear that you feel in God's presence, you cannot respect him. You might do what you think he's telling you to do out of fear, but that's not respect. Those who follow the right path honor the Lord. They obey him, perhaps. They trust him. They should anyway. Those who take the wrong path despise him. A fool's proud talk becomes a rod that beats him, but the words of the wise keep them safe. And I can imagine Solomon hearing a hotly contested case, and he sees the different demeanors of the people presenting their cases to him. And it leads him to say this: a fool's proud talk becomes a rod that beats him. The words of the wise keep them safe. Without oxen, a stable stays clean, but you need a strong ox for a large harvest. Well, it's very practical in that day and age. Oxen were cattle used to do heavy labor. But cattle are mammals, and they eat, and they have byproducts of what they eat. If you don't have a ox in the barn, yeah, the stable stays clean. If you have an ox there, then you're going to have to do the work to keep the place clean. But for a large harvest, you need that strong ox. An honest witness does not lie. A false witness breathes lies. He thinks lies, he lives in lies, until he has convinced himself that the lies he tells in court actually fulfill the oath he made to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. A mocker seeks wisdom and never finds it. Why? Because he's so convinced he's already got everything he needs. Well, he doesn't find anything. Because everywhere he finds it, he thinks he knows better. But knowledge comes easily to those with understanding. The prudent understand where they are going, but fools deceive themselves. Prudent. I want to get a definition of that just for the fun of it. Prudent definition. Prudent describes someone acting with wise judgment, caution, and care, particularly regarding future consequences or risks. The prudent take the time to see what's going on around them. Thus, they understand where they're going. Fools are so convinced they've already got all knowledge they need, they end up deceiving themselves. Fools make fun of guilt, but the godly acknowledge it and seek reconciliation. I think that relates to what we were saying about narcissists earlier. Narcissist is never wrong in their own mind. Everything they do is great and wonderful and best you've ever seen. So, they never experience guilt because they never admit they're wrong. The godly acknowledge it and seek reconciliation. When we mess up, when we do something that puts a barrier between ourselves and our Creator, if we are wise, we will put forth every effort to reconcile ourselves to our Creator as soon as possible. Each heart knows its own bitterness, and no one can fully share its joy. You don't ultimately know another person's life. So while we do share both bitterness and joy in our communal living, there is a level at which each person's emotions are their own and cannot be fully understood by others. The house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the godly will flourish. Standard Old Covenant understanding. There is a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death. I want to see that one in the King James. I'm thinking that's the one that is often quoted. And we are at chapter 14, and that is verse 12. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Or in the NIV, there is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. That's why we need wisdom. Because there are things that at first glance seem the right way to go. Seems to be the choice we should take. But if we take the time to examine it and think through what will happen in the future, turns out It's not such a good thing. Laughter can conceal a heavy heart, but when the laughter ends, the grief remains. Maybe Solomon faced somebody who thought they could make their destructive words null and void by getting their target to laugh. And the laughter in the moment can conceal that heavy heart, but when it's gone, then the treachery and the harm come back, and the person cannot have peace. The grief remains. Backsliders get what they deserve. Good people receive their reward. Standard Old Covenant understanding. Only simpletons believe everything they're told. The prudent carefully consider their steps. You'll see how often some of the things that Solomon says in one point are balanced out by something he says at another point. So he says it's wrong to despise correction and even criticism. However, only simpletons believe everything they're told. What's the old saying? Don't believe anything he tells you, only half of what he shows you. The wise are cautious and avoid danger. Fools plunge ahead with reckless confidence. Footnote A there for the, okay, where was I? There we go, okay. The wise are cautious and avoid danger. The footnote says the wise fear. Okay. Well, danger is something that is present in our lives, particularly in our modern, more mechanical society. There are a lot of dangerous things, and it is right to fear those dangers and stay away from them. And that's perhaps a little different kind of fear than the crippling fear that fires off the amygdala and puts our limbic brain in charge and turns off our rational brain. That kind of fear is a problem. But there is a rational fear that understands what something can do and understands the precautions that need to be taken to prevent it. Short-tempered people do foolish things, and schemers are hated. Simpletons are clothed with foolishness, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge. Foolishness has a footnote there. Inherit foolishness. All right? Evil people will bow before good people. The wicked will bow at the gates of the godly. Standard Old Covenant understanding for that verse. The poor are despised even by their neighbors, while the rich have many friends. Notice that this version chose to put that word friends in quotations there. Yeah, the NIV didn't bother with the quotation marks. And what does the King James do there? The rich hath many friends. That doesn't bother with quotation marks there. But I think that's important to put that in to make it clear that the rich may have many friends, but it's kind of like the young man who got his inheritance early and went away into a far country. He had a lot of friends as long as he had money. When daddy's money ran out, His friends all abandoned him, and he found himself attaching himself to a pig farmer just to have something to eat. That's why we put that friends in quotes there. It is a sin to belittle one's neighbor. Blessed are those who help the poor. If you plan to do evil, you will be lost. If you plan to do good, you will receive unfailing love and faithfulness. There may be an element of old covenant understanding there. But if you plan to do evil, sometimes even in a corrupt society, you end up being lost because that's just the nature of the evil you do. Work brings profit, but mere talk leads to poverty. You can talk about doing all these wonderful things, but until you clam up and put hand to material to produce an effect, you won't get the profit. Wealth is a crown for the wise. The effort of fools yields only foolishness. Would that that were true in our day. But wealth is often a crown for the powerful and the scheming. But still, if they act like fools, and they usually do, then their effort only yields only foolishness. A truthful witness saves lives, but a false witness is a traitor. Well, you can understand that in a court setting. Those who fear the Lord are secure. He will be a refuge for their children, he being the Lord there. Fear of the Lord is a life-giving fountain. It offers escape from the snares of death. And maybe we should replace that fear of the Lord to kingdom living. Trusting our Creator is a life-giving fountain. A growing population is a king's glory. A prince without subjects has nothing. People with understanding control their anger. A hot temper shows great foolishness. Probably all of you can think of examples of people who have a hot temper and who end up looking foolish because they can't keep their wrath under control. Now, it doesn't say people with understanding don't get angry. It says people with understanding control their anger. A peaceful heart leads to a healthy body. Jealousy is like a cancer in the bones. And I think I need to turn a page here in my NIV. Yes. Envy rots the bones. It's very similar to something we read earlier this evening. Only in this case, it's jealousy that rots the bones. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Where does it say that? I wonder if Google can find that for me. First Timothy 6:6. Okay. So, the peaceful heart leads to a healthy body. If we are content with the lot assigned to us by our Creator, and we're happy to live there, we may not have everything the neighbor has. Our neighbors across the street just had a Carvana truck show up. They exchanged a white pickup for a cream-colored SUV. I'm not going to sit here and get jealous about it. That's just going to be hard on me. I have a vehicle that gets me where I need to go. That's all I need. Those who oppress the poor insult their Maker, but helping the poor honors Him. The wicked are crushed by disaster, but the godly have a refuge when they die. Well, that's a fascinating way to put it. 32 out of the King James Version. The wicked is driven away in his wickedness, but the righteous hath hope in his death. When calamity comes, I'm reading from the NIV, the wicked are brought down, but even in death the righteous have a refuge. Wisdom is enshrined in an understanding heart. Wisdom is not found among fools. Well, that kind of goes without saying. As in the Greek and Syriac versions, the Hebrew lacks not. Wisdom is found among fools. Well, that doesn't mean they take advantage of it. It's just there. They could take advantage of it, but because they're fools, they don't. So it depends on how you understand that word found. And apparently those who translated Proverbs into Greek, living in Alexandria, after the Babylonian captivity, when the Greeks became the dominant world power, felt like they had to alter Solomon's text to make it clear that the fools don't take advantage of the wisdom. Godliness makes a nation great, but sin is a disgrace to any people. And that's hard perhaps to see in our world today, because all the nations are fully committed to sin. So how can we tell which nation is godly? There aren't any out there. So how can we tell if a godly nation is made great? There aren't any godly nations out there to examine. Sin, which is nearly universal in our world, in our day, is a disgrace to any people. Doesn't matter what name is on your country. Doesn't matter what religious assertions your government makes. Sin is still a disgrace. A king rejoices in wise servants, but he's angry with those who disgrace him. I wonder if he caught some servants misbehaving and had to have them brought before him in some kind of a criminal setting. Well, I'm looking at the clock and it says we're out of time. So I thank you for joining us, and we will continue. Since we've had a chapter break, that's a good place to stop. We can begin Proverbs chapter 15 next week, which would be April the 24th. Am I right? Yes. And so until then, we say goodbye and God bless.